Hi, welcome to the Sterile Processor's Guide to Success podcast. This is a podcast where I talk about the challenges that we face in sterile processing as sterile processors and what we can do to solve these issues. We focus on different topics every week. The topic of this week's podcast is endoscopy. Endoscopy is a procedure that lets your doctor look inside your body. It uses an instrument called an endoscope. Endoscopes have a tiny camera attached to a long, thin tube. The doctors move it through a body passageway or an opening to see inside of an organ. Sometimes the scopes are used for surgery, such as for removing polyps from the colon. So when you go and get a procedure done and they're having to look inside your body and doing colonoscopies, for example, if they're doing a colonoscopy on a patient and they happen to see something that they think could be a problem or a polyp or possibly even cancer, they can actually even remove and take a biopsy while using the endoscope so they can actually see what they're taking on camera. With the technology that we have now, it's crazy with cameras and how tiny they are, and how we can pretty much attach them onto anything these days. Our phones, our computers, even our doorbells, security cameras, and even medical instruments use these type of tiny cameras. An endoscope isn't just one type of instrument. There are a bunch of different types of endoscopes, and it depends on what kind of organ that you're trying to look into. There'll be different type of endoscope for that, so it's not just one type of endoscope that looks into every area of your body. There's specific ones for specific places, versus looking into like a uterine area versus something that goes down your throat, or something for a colonoscopy. There's all types of different endoscopes, so I wanted to discuss that. And I also want to discuss the problem with endoscopes. So we all know, we've learned that cleaning endoscopes are kind of problematic. They have to be taken apart per the manufacturer's specifications and cleaned to the specifications and then reassembled. And there's just a lot of steps where stuff can go wrong. And even if all the steps are followed to a T when you're cleaning an endoscope, there's still a slight chance for something to go wrong. So learning that and knowing that, the only option that I come to is to not even figure out how to clean these endoscopes and to just use one-use endoscopes, single use. If you use a single use, you just throw it away after, and it does not have to be processed. I read on the National Library of Medicine website that the complex endoscope designs with several long, narrow internal channels and bands that make it difficult to remove all debris and microorganisms, as well as a large variety of endoscope vendors and models require different cleaning procedures and devices on materials. There could be potential damage as well to the endoscope. Since the scope have to be disassembled and reassembled, there could be scratches and crevices of the endoscope. In those scratches, you can harbor microorganisms. You can promote biofilm formation as well. So single-use endoscopes is probably the direction that everybody's going to go eventually. It's known in the medical industry that they're hard to clean, and reusing them is more costly. So after looking into it, if you have a dirty endoscope, it would have to be reprocessed. So speaking of costs, that's what I think of as the main reason of why hospitals wouldn't want to use single use. scopes because you would think, oh, there's a cost of buying that single-use scope that we're going to just eventually throw away. So I read on the Health Trust Performance Group website, there are actually a bunch of disposable endoscopes already on the market. So there's a few different categories that they have them for different types of procedures. And the website even has listed some categories and manufacturers along with the manufacturing numbers for some of these products. So, there's information out there. If a doctor or surgeon or a hospital is thinking about trying these, there's actual tested, proven medical manufacturers out there that are making these types of scopes to be one-use scopes. I read in the Alt Technology website that in 2022, they claim that there is a pivot away from reusable endoscopes and in favor of disposable single-use endoscopes. So, the right back to the cost of the endoscopes, they're actually using them in hospital settings, so it's not just an idea of, well, maybe these would be good. They are being manufactured, they are being used, and I found some great information regarding the cost of single-use endoscopes versus the reusable ones. So if reusable scopes are too hard to sterilize and have the potential not to be properly sterilized, using a single use that you would throw away after seems much more logical, right? So as far as the newsroom website, they claim that a reusable endoscope averages $1,400 to $1,900, and that's per procedure, while a single-use endoscope can range from $400 to $1,900 per procedure. So the fact that it can even be cheaper to use a single-use endoscope than a reusable endoscope makes sense financially as well. So, going back to how we can produce these tiny cameras and put them on anything, this technology's been out for a while. The cameras are only getting better with their imaging as time goes on. But because we've had these tiny cameras out for so long, they're relatively inexpensive, versus some of these reusable pieces of equipment are built way more robust, and they're much, more heavy duty and meant to last, and be reused. But when you're reusing them, there is a cost associated with that as well. So we got to keep that in mind. But I definitely see a shift when I see this cost is so comparable. So sometimes it's actually even cheaper to use a single-use scope than a reusable. So it does seem, though, that the main pushback, as I read, is doctors and surgeons claiming that the single-use scopes don't have a good enough quality of a picture as the reusable ones. But I think over time, the quality of the pictures will get better. We're still kind of in the beginning stages and at the very beginning of reusable endoscopes being replaced by the single use. So, we have a little bit of time for the technology to catch up and the imaging to get better. But the newsroom also brought up a good site about the point of reusable scopes, a couple of their downsides. So the reusable scopes require a higher level of continuous training and skills for the physicians and nurses that are actually using the piece of equipment. It also talked about the fact that the reusable scopes need to be reprocessed after each use and repaired when they fail, their leak test, or have functional failure that could negatively affect a patient, during a procedure. So, I mentioned earlier that everything has a cost, and even let's say that you have a scope and you take it through the whole process of disassemble, cleaning, sterilizing, reassemble, inspecting it, and then inspection you find that there's moisture inside of it or something about it didn't pass the final inspection. Well, now you reprocess it again. Um, I've read that on average, just to reprocess a scope can cost up to $130. So, a single use scope, you're never going to have that problem because you're not reprocessing it all. You're just throwing it away. So I thought that was interesting. And it's a pretty good point. You just think of, oh, as a sterile processing technician, if something doesn't come out clean, we just put it through again. Anything that doesn't come out clean that you're reprocessing, it's not free. Everything is at a cost. We're all paid workers to make money. And, it's eventually, costing the hospital money. So, trying to work as efficiently as possible and eliminating any type of need for reprocessing, and to minimize that would definitely be optimal for the hospital. So, anything that could be single use, especially these endoscopes that require a little bit more, this isn't just, a pair of clamps. This isn't any kind of other tool that can just be easily cleaned and doesn't have a lot of parts. This is one of the ones that has to be, completely broken down, disassembled, reassembled. There's just a lot that goes into it. So anything that could be single use, especially that complex, I think is definitely the direction that you'd want to go. And definitely in the medical field for not just endoscopes, for single use tools in general. But I thought those were a couple of good points to consider. I think the reason that the single-use endoscopes are also gaining popularity is because they eliminate large capital expenditures and they require a lower level of training and skills to operate them. And so that would eliminate the costs related to processing and repairs, like I mentioned earlier. So with considering all that, I think the future of endoscopes will definitely go to single use. I know that the camera technology will eventually get better as time goes on, and it kind of opens up a little bit more, I'd say, I guess, time, resources in the sterile processing department where, if we're using a lot of single-use tools like endoscope, something that takes a long time to process, we're almost freeing up time to focus in other areas or, be able to sterilize and process more, like a higher volume of equipment. So, I mean, it seems there seems to be too many good reasons that I've found where single-use scopes would be more preferable over the reusable. So, aside from, aside from the clarity and the quality of the imaging, like I said, I know that those will catch up. And these single-use scopes are also designed in a way that they don't require a whole bunch of training. They're supposed to be easy to use right out of the package, not be very complicated. And so I think that's one of the challenges that the manufacturers are probably going through is, not only manufacturing something at the best price point that they can to make it desirable to buy these single use, but also increasing the quality of the technology with the pictures and whatnot, but also remaining a user-friendly piece of equipment where the nurses or surgeons or whoever is going to be using these scopes, where they don't have to have extensive training to use these type of scopes. It would be more of a basic universal type of thing. So it's definitely something that I could see happening, not just with scopes, like I said, definitely single use tools, but not everything can be single use. There's no sense in throwing away certain equipment that's not very difficult to sterilize. But if we're going to go towards single use equipment, like scopes, I think that we should focus on the type of equipment that is more complicated to clean. because the more simple type of equipment is not as involved, and I feel like sterile processing department can, process all that with really no problem. That's really what they're made to do, is process all the stainless steel tools that we use in a hospital setting. So it's just time. With time, the technology will get better, and then like everything else, as time goes on, the price point will also go down too. So at some point, reusable may be obsolete if single-use scopes are so desirable that you want to use them over a reusable, or the price just gets too ridiculous to use a reusable over a single use. I think that would be a possibility that happens in the future. So that's about all I have for today. I just wanted to discuss single-use endoscopes and how that could be a potential, win for the sterile processing department if that idea is able to be adopted. So thank you for listening to this week's podcast. I hope you guys have a great day, and stay tuned. There'll be another podcast next week. Thank you.